A foundational Jewish belief is that we have one God. Ein od milvado. There's nothing but God. God is one. And yet we have many different ways to experience God. And therefore there are many names given in our Torah, in our tradition, of God interacting with us. How we experience God, we have a different name for each way that we experience God. When we experience God as healer, there's a name to describe our perception of God as healer. When we experience God as compassionate, there's a name to describe our experience of God as compassionate. When God is the judge of the world, of us, then there's another name to describe God as the God of justice. And we experience God in many different ways. And so there are many different names that we use to ascribe the way we experience God. Similarly, I am a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a child, I'm a friend, I'm a teacher, and all the people around me experience me differently, and they have different names for me depending on the relationship I have with them and depending on the way in which they experience me. So too, God is one, and yet we have many different names to describe God because we experience God in many different ways. At the beginning of this week's Torah portion, Parshat Vayera, God is coming to Moses and telling Moses that there's a new name that the world is going to experience God as. Up until now, the patriarchs have experienced God with the name Kel Shaddai. It's a God that operates within nature. God who created the universe with natural boundaries and the laws of nature. And God operated within those boundaries. God was the God of justice. And now, says God to Moses, you are going to experience a different expression of God. You're going to experience God who is the fulfiller of the promise that God gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the foremothers, that we would be a people, that we would go from being a family to being a nation, that we would be enslaved, that we would be brought to Mount Sinai and be given a Torah, and that we would be taken into a land and we would be a special nation to God. This is the promise that God gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the foremothers. And now God is appearing to Moses and saying, now you are going to experience the fulfillment of that promise that I gave to the foremothers and the forefathers. And you will know me as a new name. And the new name is spelled with a yud and a hey and a vav and a hey. We use the word Hashem because it's an ineffable name that we don't know how to describe. We don't know the name. We can't say the name. But this is the name that is now being introduced into our tradition. There's a new expression of God in the world. God who is above nature. God who is, who was, who will be. God who is beyond time. God who created time, created space. God who is infinite. God who is beyond our capacity to understand. And God is telling Moses, I'm going to bring you out. I'm going to fulfill the promise I gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the foremothers. I'm going to bring you out. And this is a new name you're going to know me by. The Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, the Hashem. And Moses is now tasked with bringing the Jewish people out. He's going to be the mouthpiece for God. And God says, I'm going to redeem the people. And he uses 4 different expressions of the way in which God is going to bring out the Jewish people. God says to Moses, I will take you out. I will take the Jewish people out from under the slavery. You will no longer be burdened with the slavery. That's the first expression of redemption. The second one is that you will be rescued. I will take you out from the land of Egypt, that you will no longer be surrounded by the idolatry and the oppression and the evil that's in this land, the land that's steeped with negativity and evil. I will take you out of that land. Physically, I will remove you, like drawing a baby animal out of the womb, and pull you out from one nation, the Jewish nation, out from another nation. I'm going to pull you, extract you. I will rescue you. And then I will redeem you. I will split the sea. I will take the psychological Egypt out of you, that the psychological slavery that confines you and stops you from being you. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to split the sea. I'm going to drown the Egyptians, and you will be freed from the psychological effects of being slaves to Pharaoh. And finally, I will take you to Mount Sinai, and I will give you the Torah. I will give you connection to God. I will bring you to the land. We have 3 expressions of redemption that speak about a physical redemption. I'm going to unburden you from the slavery. I will take you out of the land of Egypt, and I will take Egypt out of you. Those are 3 stages in a physical redemption. And so we're freed from something, but we're also free to something. And we're freed to now have a relationship with God. That's the sequitur. We're going to be physically freed. We're going to go from something to something. And the something we're going to is connection to God, connection to the infinite, a connection to this God that we describe as Hashem, this God who is beyond our ability to understand, and yet is master of the universe and is able to suspend nature and bring the plagues. In this week's Torah portion, we read about 7 of the 10 plagues. And God is bringing these plagues so that the whole world, the Jews, the Egyptians, that everybody, the whole world will know that there is one God, that God is above everything, controls everything, created everything, is in charge of everything. And that's the lesson that all of this exodus from Egypt is here to teach us. And the Jewish people are being redeemed in order to have a relationship with God, and not to have a relationship only with Pharaoh and slavery. And I wonder, when it then describes that the reason that in the beginning the people couldn't hear Moses' message is because they were short of breath and they were overworked. They had such a burden of work and they were so out of breath that they didn't have any capacity to think beyond their workload. And as the redemption plays itself out, the people start to groan. In this week's Torah portion, we learned that the people groan, and God heard that groaning. That groaning is like the beginning of a relationship, the beginning of I need something other than this. And I wonder in our days if we sort of bring this into our world and we say, well, we're constrained. What's constraining us? What's holding us back? What's physically holding me back? And how do I get to the 4th stage, which is to have this relationship with God, with the transcendent, with that which is eternal. That's where we're heading. Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, that even in the oppression, there's a meaning that we have to have, or we have to understand that we have, in order to live fully. And when God's bringing the Jewish people out from Egypt, and he's bringing the Jewish people to have a relationship with the divine, that's a way for us to understand what our lives are about. Yes, we have to work and we have to live in this world and we have to be physical, but we also have to remember that what sets us free is a relationship with the divine, is a relationship with the transcendent. How do we do that? We do it with Shabbos, with the Sabbath, with a day off where we stop. We do it with prayer and meditation, where we slow down and we can think about the meaning of life and why we're here and what's the purpose of our existence. And we can do it with Torah study, where we connect to the infinite wisdom through the Torah. So these are 3 ways. The Sabbath and the Torah study and prayer and meditation are ways that we can transcend the physical world we're in and connect to something much bigger and much holier than ourselves. And so, and maybe pull out that holy spark that's within each one of us and connect that back to its source. So really, when we read about the redemption from Egypt, as we're reading about it now so quickly, we've got to the slavery in Egypt and now the 7 of the 10 plagues, and Moses being told, I'm going to bring the people out by God, that God's going to bring the people out from Egypt. And there's going to be 4 expressions of redemption, that God will take us out from under the burdens, from that which enslaves us, that God's going to take us out from the land that's steeped in idolatry and negativity. He's going to take us out of that land, and God's going to redeem us, and he's going to bring us through the Red Sea. He's going to take that enslaved mentality out of us, so we're psychologically free to then have that relationship to God. That is the purpose of our lives. So if you think about that in our day, we need these built-in ways to transcend the physical. And some of those are the Sabbath as a day off, as a day of rest, as a day to breathe, as a day to not work and not create, and to just be, a day of being, not doing. And Torah study is a way to connect to the wisdom, the divine wisdom, and prayer and meditation as a way to access a relationship with the divine. And so when the people were short of breath and were overworked, in Egypt. I wonder if there isn't a parallel in our lives sometimes where we feel like we're overworked and out of breath. And how do we not just groan, but how do we reevaluate our lives and then recenter our lives so that we're able to not be short of breath and not be overworked, so that we have time to have and work on that relationship with the divine.